question is about how you correlate Dr. David Hawkins's work into the vibration of star seeds. I have read that he mentions that souls come in at a specific vibration and pretty much stay in that resonance, aka they don't exponentially change from that vibration. So if they come in at the courage vibration, they will stay in that vibration. Do you notice the vibrations of what star seeds are, or is it random? Or do you think that can change with the new earth vibrations and opportunities in play? Thank you. This is such an awesome question. And I'm really glad that you submitted it when you did, because everyone who is just starting mystery school right now, this is one of the first concepts that you're going to be encountering inside of energy management. I talk a lot about Dr. Hawkins' scale of consciousness, about the concept of power versus force. Dr. Hawkins did presuppose that it is, in his view, very, very difficult to change or recalibrate your level of vibration once you have incarnated in density. And if I recall correctly, his viewpoint was that over 85% of beings on Earth, of people on Earth, were vibrating at the level of 200 or below. 200 is the level of courage, and that is actually the split of resonance of power, so everything above 200, and force, everything below 200, right? So if 85% of the population, according to Dr. Hawkins, is resonating at a level below 200, and there's not a whole lot of room down there, right? There's not as many levels of vibration, and therefore, in his view, consciousness from 0 to 200 as there is from 200 to 1,000, right? And I can't remember, I think that he thought Gandhi was at the level of 750. Don't know if that's correct or not, so don't quote me on that, but I remember it was above 500. And so his viewpoint was the reason why Earth had not essentially destroyed itself with this wide disparity of frequency is for every one person who is vibrating at the level of 500 or above, that essentially would cancel out the lower vibrations of 750,000 people. And that's saying a lot, right? That's making a pretty bold claim, isn't it? So here's a couple of things that I want to point out. And these are just my experiences and my opinions about the consciousness scale. So my number one caveat is when you're either working through this material for the first time, or if you're in the process of revisiting it, always, always trust your inner compass and your calibration on how true this feels to you, right? My use of power versus force is the best way that I know to liken our conscious awareness, our perception of what we're doing, of how we're choosing to view not just ourselves, but those around us and the world around us, and conceptualize that in a way that marries the full vibrational codes available throughout our life, our light body. So we're not just seeing ourselves as a physical body. And as star seeds, that should be a pretty easy concept to accept, right? Because if you're in this state where you're identifying as a star seed or you're exploring your multidimensionality, more often than not, you're comfortable with saying, I am not just my flesh and blood. I also have a ripple effect with my own energetic frequency that is influenced by my self perception, right? By the thoughts that I think about myself and the world and other people, by the stories I tell myself, by my choices of whether or not to be in an observer state or in a judgment state, right? So I'm using this scale as a way for you to more broadly experience your light body and to start noticing behaviors and ways of being that feel good throughout all of the layers of your light body and therefore yourself. And behaviors, ways of being, and sensations that feel really limiting. They feel confining. There's something about that sensation that feels really sticky or heavy or dense. And maybe for now, it's totally okay. You can't pinpoint exactly where it is, either in the physical body or in the light body, but you know that it's there, right? And so by learning how to identify the different effects of calibration that particular emotions or ways of being might have on your light body, you now have a way of viewing both sensation and the self that is much more informed by your use of frequency. And the reason why I say use is, again, there's this break between power and force, and that feels very nebulous sometimes. Like, at least in my opinion, that feels very nebulous sometimes. So I think that it's really, really helpful to have that scale and that natural progression of like very, very high vibration, so high that there is literally no separation between all of the layers of your light body and your interior sensation, and low vibration, where it feels like you cannot move beyond the confines of your body, which again is a byproduct of density. So that was my big preamble caveat to answering this. The first thing I'm going to say is I do think it is really important to consider when Dr. Hawkins accomplished most of his work. And that's not to say that it's outdated in any way, because I do feel that he uncovered part of our universal golden thread, universal truth, in a way that was translatable into density, and therefore we can understand it and communicate about it. But I think the first year that Power versus Force was published was 1994, which is almost 30 years ago. It's 28 years ago now. And from my view, where I am sitting, not being a creatrix, although perhaps that might be something for you to explore, right? I believe that there has been enough intergenerational spacing and planning that has happened to somewhat negate his argument that we are unchangeable, right? I am not sure how much he considered the presence of the starseed light body and married that with the conditioning that we receive in density while doing this work, because at the time in 1994, the concept of being a starseed was not new, but we absolutely were not at the same level of activation than we are right now, right? Like, I was obviously a living, breathing starseed in 1994, but I was also, what, like 6 years old, 7 years old. So I would not have any sort of cognizant thought process around, like, oh, today I feel like I'm in the vibration of courage, or I'm in the vibration of shame. Like, even though my earliest imprinted memories of those lower vibrations were absolutely formed in the childhood years, I think that it's a lot easier to pick up on when those, like, below 200 were adopted by the body versus when anything above 200 was adopted by the body, because we are so often conditioned through that lens of trauma or guilt or shame, because that's how, as a child, we learn what is acceptable in density and what is not acceptable in density, right? So, with that being said, my perception and my argument is twofold. The first thing is that I believe that all galactic souls, and this is also including Earth souls, this is not limited to star seeds because they are of our galaxy, right? All primal Earth souls. I do believe that all souls come to this Earth and choose to come to this Earth at the maximum vibration. They are here coming in at a frequency that cannot be contained in density. I'm not going to claim to know what happens in utero, right? Maybe analysts could fill me in on that, or how the process happens of confining that light level to a small density based space. But I believe that before we are here, like birthed in the flesh, we all come in with the intention to be at the highest level possible. And that is somehow dialed down further and further and further and further the more we agree to participate in all of the contracts and agreements that are here in density. So you remember how I just mentioned that a lot of those lower density frequencies are imprinted very, very early, because that is how we learn how to navigate the world around us. So think about those processes that are going on. If I am a 3-year-old and I don't know anything other than love or joy or peace, and that is how I'm in my fullest expression, and then somehow I am introduced to a completely opposite sensation. I'm introduced to grief or anger or shame or guilt. That is going to have a very, very tangible effect on how I experience my energy from that point going forward. Because it's almost like I have this set point. I have this way of experiencing the world. I don't know anything different, and I don't know that something else exists. And then when something else presents itself as an option and is actually reinforced and rewarded, this is going to go down. So I really do not agree with the idea that your vibrational level is static. And the other reason why I don't agree with this, like I said, it's all dependent on our conditioning as humans. And humans are largely taught to be reactive creatures instead of proactive creatures. So if you think about the differences between power and force, force is extremely reactive. Force, all of the emotions and associations that are in that matrix of vibration, those are all reactionary, taken from the perspective that everything is outside of your control, right? That you don't have a locus of control, that you don't have any agency. And I'm not necessarily talking about physical control. I'm talking about the control of perspective, right? So all of those lower vibrational constructs are operating from this reactive place where they're going to come in. You are going to be resonating at that vibration if you allow your body, your consciousness, and your light body to react in a way that is in line with any of those emotions when an unexpected situation comes your way. And then we can get into the concepts of patterning and people that get really comfortable in those vibrations because they've had to react over and over and over and over and over again to being put in this place and not realizing that they do have the agency to not actually react and to instead observe, right? Do you think they can change now with the new earth vibrations and opportunities? Yes, absolutely. To me, from what I have witnessed and seen, even over the past 3 years, 4 years now, our collective vibration is rapidly changing. And to play into one of Dr. Hawkins' arguments, I believe that we are at an incredibly divisive point in our timeline where his idea of counterbalance is absolutely at play, but I think it's for an inverse reason. Like he gave Gandhi as an example because Gandhi had this incredible amount of people who followed his teachings for the time and place that he was alive and the types of media and mediums we had for communication at that point, right? But with where we are now, I believe that there are so many people, not just star seeds, earth souls, who are very, very consciously doing the work of recalibrating their perceptions and therefore unlocking all levels of their light body perception, seeing themselves differently, and actually being in the world differently. And that's happening at such a high rate that instead of one person being at a certain level to counterbalance 750,000 others here who are at level 200 or below, there are now more and more and more and more beings who are attempting to move in, like dig their heels further into the lower vibrational sensations to counterbalance all of this activation activity that's happening. So density loves homeostasis and equilibrium. Like we think about how the body operates, right? That's our body, our physical flesh and blood's one job in density is to remain in homeostasis, is for all of those processes to keep happening within the body, to keep our heart beating and keep us breathing, right? And so there has to be balance in order for that to occur. And that balance can be tilted either way. And I think that's absolutely what is happening right now with the collective vibration, because there are so many star seeds, so many very highly activated beings, so many primal earth souls who are recognizing where we are in the timeline and doing this work, that all of these frequencies of shame, guilt, like I said, we're in a really divisive point on the timeline. Those are going to be dialed up so that people can make the decision of how and where they are most comfortable. I'm not trying to say that from like a defeatist or gloom and doom standpoint whatsoever. I do believe that it is possible for anyone to change at any time. And I don't believe that all changes have to be gradual. Sure, we have to remember that when we're working in density, the tangible effects of change are not always going to be as immediate as our internal locus of change. But I do not believe that people are going to come in at a certain vibration and leave at the same vibration or continue to exist at the same vibration. And I do think that there are new opportunities that are opening, but those are opening on, for lack of a better term, they're opening on both sides of the equation. So it's not just about those who are choosing to activate and to step into a higher consciousness. It's also about those who have become so comfortable and kind of trapped in this falsehood of being nourished by using force continuously, that, like I said, they're going to kind of dig their heels in, right? So I hope that that answered your question. Again, I want to say thank you for bringing that up because I know that is revisiting one of our foundational concepts. So, on behalf of everyone who's coming in and new, that is super, super timely and helpful for you to mention that.